Now, I'm going to start with you, Shane.
Sure.
What is the issue here in Sydney? What's happening? What is the major issue that's confronting government, business and the community?
Well, I think we are all clear that we have a housing crisis. And as Sir Winston Churchill once said, you should never waste a good crisis. And the reason is, I think, we have an affordability problem, particularly for the younger generation. We've got interest rates that have been jacked up 13 times in a row. We've got feasibilities on properties that don't work anymore at any appropriate margin. And yet the price can't increase, because if the affordability that is allowed to the customer isn't increased, then the customer cannot pay more. So essentially what we've got is an inability to supply the market with more, because we have the slowest planning system in the Western Hemisphere, and by the way, with the best of intentions. As Alexander the Great once said, I'm dying with the help of too many physicians. So they give you the medicine, you drink it, you feel worse, you drink the next one, you feel worse. And that's how I feel. But not tonight. And I think if we want to do something right for the next 10 years, we have to make the supply of housing and the price of housing accessible to a greater number of people.
Great, thank you, Shane. Tom, your thoughts?
I think one of the main problems is there's no recognition in the public service and amongst the decision makers, council level, state level, even national level, that we are actually in a crisis. You don't get the feeling that they're pulling out the stops to deal with a major earthquake or a tsunami. You get the feeling that they're more interested in setting up a committee and then going and consulting, and maybe in 6 months' time we might do something, but we'll probably wind it back a fair bit from what we initially announced. And that's what we're seeing time and time again. We're not seeing a response to a crisis that is normally what you would expect when you've got a crisis. You're seeing modest reform at the margin. You're seeing an over-obsession with consultation with those that might say, no, you're welcoming and opening the doors to the NIMBY communities, those that want to charge more or fix a whole bunch of other problems. They don't have a housing supply problem, but fix it at the same time. That's not the response to a crisis. We are in a crisis, and we have to go about resolving it by doing things differently. And I'm not feeling that right now, but my goodness me, I'm doing my best to push for it.
Good on you, Tom. Professor, your thoughts?
Well, I could agree with both my previous speakers there. Look, we have got a crisis, there's no doubt about it, but we've got a number of crises, not just the one. Housing supply is part of it. Housing affordability is another part of it. But I think one of the problems is we've got a what we call academics call a wicked problem. And it's the sort of problem, it's the sort of thing if you said to an Irishman, I hope there's no Irish people in the, well, my brother is actually Irish, so I don't mind. You know, if you want to go to Dublin, I wouldn't start from here. Well, that's one of the problems we've got. We've got a complex problem that defies unravelling, you know, and the best minds in the business are trying to do it, and they're still struggling. So, you know, I think one of the things we have to do is understand that this is a difficult political problem, and politicians, if they're difficult problems, tend to shy back from them and push it up the road to the next person that comes in 3 years' time. That's not going to solve our problem. We do need to think carefully about what the problems, the multiple problems of the housing market are, and set out to individually address each of those things. Supply will certainly help. Absolutely, supply will certainly help, but there's more to it than just supply.
Thank you, Professor. Shane, why are we in this mess? I mean, what's caused it? I mean, you know, if a couple of years ago we weren't even talking about housing, we were talking about COVID and we were talking about other matters. Now, all of a sudden, in the last 12 months, housing has become a big issue. We live in such a beautiful country. We're so lucky to be here. And I keep saying to people that we've all got that golden ticket to be in this fantastic city, in this fantastic country, compared to where our other brethren around the world are suffering. Why Sydney? I mean, it's all of Australia, not just Sydney, but Sydney it's a bigger issue than anywhere else.
I think we are crippled by our own success. We're probably the world's most beautiful city. I mean, I've been to 300 and something cities around the world. If this is not the most beautiful, I don't know what is. The problem as well then is you layer that with an extremely slow and dysfunctional planning system in delivering approvals, which you need to build stuff. And then you talk about the fees and charges that are charged on, particularly on property. That essentially, I mean, in a $900,000 apartment, more than a third of that, more than 300,000 is fees and charges.
Yeah.
And then you need 400,000 to build it, and then you need 200,000 or 300,000 for the land, and there's zero left for profit. Now, let me give you a perspective. When I was a kid of, say, 12, you could buy an average house with land in a middle ring suburb, say Ashfield, right, for 3 times the average annual income, 3 times. Today, that's 12 times the average annual income in Sydney. So it doesn't take Einstein to work out that it is further and further out of reach for various complex reasons, one of which is, I mean, think of the 3 components. You've got land, you've got construction cost, and then you've got fees and charges. The fees and charges are out of control, right? They're out of control, and none of them are coming down. Construction cost is up 30% from 3 years ago. It'll probably go up again next year. You can't build now for less than $6,500 a square metre for a decent amount of GFA build anywhere in Sydney. We're not talking the luxury end. And if you deduct all of that from the price that the market can afford, it almost renders feasibility is not possible for people to take a risk on a complex process like construction to deliver housing.
Mm-hmm.
Tom?
So where did it begin? Well, it wasn't 1 year ago. I was accused of sloganeering by the former head of the Department of Planning and
Tom, that's terrible.
Jim Betts.
Oh,
It was
terrible.
a UDIA function, and he got up and he said the property development community needs to stop sloganeering by referring to a housing supply crisis. And that was in 2021. In fact, I've been saying it since 2019. And the reason is because the number of approvals had dropped off from 73,000 a year at the peak around 2015-16, right down to around 50,000. And I said, as night follows day, in 3 or 4 years' time, we will have a housing supply problem. And I said, what's more, if we get hit by some sort of exogenous shock, as the economists call it, an external shock, and I was thinking a war, but it turned out to be COVID. It turned out to be COVID. I said, we're stuffed because we haven't got the plans on the shelf ready to build. We don't have the economic activity. We can't stimulate quickly. You can't build if you don't have an approval. It's as simple as that. And sure enough, COVID happened. I wasn't anticipating that particularly. And 3 or 4 years later, now everyone's talking about the housing supply crisis. Everyone from the Prime Minister to the state premiers of all the states, it's not just us, which says something. It's not just a New South Wales problem. In fact, it's not just an Australian problem. This is a global problem. A global problem where we're dealing with the changing character of our suburbs.
That's true.
And we're having to deal with that because we're constrained. We're constrained by environmental realities. Bushfires in America, they're not just here, bushfires in Greece. We're constrained by, in Australia, oceans and mountains, national parks and wildlife, all of which now higher profile. So what does that mean? It means we now need to look to go up, not out. By going up, we have an opportunity to better utilise the land we've got. In fact, it puts a smaller green footprint on the planet if you build up and take advantage of the same plot of land but put more houses on it. Sure, you have to have green space surrounding it. Sure, you have to have tree canopy in the areas. But you can do more of that if you go up a lot, not just up a little bit. That's the problem I think we face.
Yeah.
We've got this attitude that doesn't really want to go up too much because that might change the character of our suburbs. Get real, we're going to have to change the character of the suburbs. We're not going to be able to preserve the North Shore of Sydney and Aspic, just like the local residents would like to do. We just can't afford that sort of luxury anymore. We've got to get real about, we have a housing supply crisis. We can't keep going out and out and out forever, so we're going to have to look at going up.
Professor?
Exactly, and we will be going up. There's no doubt about that, because I think all the evidence is that going out is not well, we can't in Sydney. You actually can't do that very, very far because we are constrained, as we've heard. But I think the critical problem we have is that the planning system that we've inherited from previous generations was basically developed to build new homes on greenfield sites. All you have to do is move the cows out of the way, subdivide, put a house up, okay, connect it to the sewers and so on, but pretty easy. Now we're faced with retooling the places where we all live and work. That's much, much harder. I don't think we have a planning system which is fundamentally orientated towards rebuilding communities that we have around us, and that's exactly what the struggle is. And in Ku-ring-gai, they're very good at struggling. Other parts of the city, not so much. But that's what we have to face: is a planning system which was not built for the job that it's being asked to do.
Yeah.
Let me give you a practical example. I calculated that the average speed of a garden snail is 0.05 kilometers an hour. There's lots of types of snails, but the average snail travels at 0.05 kilometers an hour. Now, if you do the maths, that snail has enough time to go to Canberra and back before I get a $50 million DA approved in New South Wales.
Now, Shane, Tom, I reckon we should go to the telly on that story. I reckon that can be front page, and you and I can make a comment about it. Now, Shane, how did you calculate? Did you grab a snail from your garden? Your wife probably looked at you and your kids thought, this is strange. What's happened to our dad? He's just grabbed a snail and he's probably going to eat it. But no, you didn't eat it. You actually put it somewhere and you calculated how fast it walks.
Well, these are published statistics.
Oh, okay,
it's
sorry. I thought
the published statistics. But let me say this to you. Time is one of the parameters of business, right? It may not be the parameter for everybody, but it's one of the parameters of business. And if you don't account for time correctly in any business, you can't survive in that business for very long. So if the approvals take too long, the construction takes too long, there are just so many rules. I've been 24 years running UG since I founded it. I would say there's 80% more regulation and rules that we have now than 24 years ago. That's just in my professional life. Now, let me remind you of what Justice Sutherland once said. Justice Sutherland is very famous because he was Chief Justice of the US Supreme Court in 1926, and he was the one that created the concept of zoning as we know it in the Western Hemisphere. So within 6 months, 500 US cities had zoning ordinances. So people got very confused about the rules, like we are now. They're going and coming, they don't know, is it this ordinance, that DCP, this LEP, which bit, this contradicts this, and they said, Chief Justice, we are very confused about the rules. And this is what he said. They're the sagacious words of Justice Sutherland. He said, whenever I'm confused about the rules, I just remember one rule. Salus populi suprema lex est. The welfare of the people is the supreme law. So if we're making laws, why don't we remember the welfare of the people? That'll remind us of which laws need to deliver.
Thank you, Shane. I now know where Solomon got his quotes from very important people. We noticed in Solomon's presentation quoting, a number of well-regarded, well-respected historians or authors, and now I know where he got his quotes from you, Shane. 100% correct. Tom, affordability is a big issue. We've all got children or we've got grandkids. And when we all were growing up, we could buy properties and, it was affordable. Now affordability for the next generation is a major problem. What do you think governments could do to at least assist in some shape or form the affordability aspect of buying a home nowadays?
A lot of the changes that we've seen in the last few years have been in the context of pretty much zero interest rates. So we've been able to absorb increased fees, taxes and charges. We've been able to absorb increased building standards, NCC adjustments, basics, neighbours. We've been able to absorb introduction of new fees, affordable housing taxes and fees and charges, changes to increasing setbacks from the street, or increasing separation between the buildings, or no overshadowing of public open space and parklands, protection of solar access, sunlight to every bedroom. All of these things have increased the cost of the delivery of housing, and we've kind of just sleepwalked into a crisis by kind of just accepting that that's the way it is, or at least our political leaders. Ironically, it's the Liberal Party, the party of business, who led the charge towards this over-regulatory state. The changes that David Chandler introduced. Well, sure, there was an issue at the time back in Opal Tower and Mascot Tower, but by goodness me, there's a whole stack of builders in this room who've never done anything wrong and now pay the significant increased regulatory burden associated with random OC audits, having to prepare all your registered architectural drawings up front. All of these things had costs, all of these things had time, all of these things had risk, and we wonder why we've got an affordability crisis. We've got to deal with some of these challenges, face on, admit that maybe we got it wrong in the past, and start looking for ways to turn them back. That's the only way forward.
Professor, your thoughts?
Well, this is one of these problems that has kind of we've sleepwalked into, as Tom says. I don't necessarily agree that regulation is a bad thing. I don't think none of the speakers on the stage would think it was a bad thing. It's a good thing if it works in the interest of the people. And I think one of the problems we got ourselves into is the hubris over the last 10 years of development perhaps got people into the business that might not or should not have been there, and I think we'd all probably agree with that. So the shakeout is that everybody pays the price. So for the future, now the building commissioner is not with us for much longer in his current form, but that system is going to be here, and quality has got to be the kind of key word from here on in for the development business, because if you don't have quality, then people won't trust your product. And I wouldn't buy a car if I thought the thing was going to fall apart or the steering wheel was going to come off. Now that's the problem you got. The punters out there don't understand the details that Tom has just listed, the great issues that you have to deal with just to get a planning permission through, let alone build the thing. I think that's one of your problems. You've got to understand that the punters, and I know them, and they complain, they have problems with their buildings. Friends of mine, colleagues, they're the people who will either, will give you the answer down the track as to whether your supply is going to be well regarded. So think of the quality that will be produced, and make sure that we don't get into those problems that we've had with Opal Tower. Yes, that was fixed. Mascot, not so much. But that's where we've got to focus, to get the product right and get the trust back in the product that we're building.
Shane, what can government do to increase supply? Increasing supply would help, at least from the affordability perspective. But what do you think the government needs to do? I mean, we've got a federal government that says they want to build 1.5 million homes in X period of time. You've got state governments who don't believe that they're going to achieve that outcome. So supply is a big issue, and we really should be relying on the private sector to be delivering and giving incentives for businesses to go out there and build more homes. But what do you think government needs to do to increase the aspect of availability?
Well, the private sector is the only way you're going to deliver it. I think if the historical records that we all know and have experienced in the last 25 years are real, then the government can't deliver any of this. They cannot. They will need the private sector to deliver it. Now, the easiest thing to do for the private sector is to unwrap the red tape. Now, you'd all be surprised if I reminded you that red tape was a concept invented by Holy Emperor Charles V. In the 15th century.
I was waiting for it.
Now, would you believe that red tape was originally a tape put by the emperor on a file to make it go faster, because red is the color of the emperor. The other files were wrapped with string. So I want to know, at which point did red tape go from going faster to this malaise that we're in now? That's question number one.
I love it. I love it.
Question number two.
Sleeping with you and hearing you a pillow talk.
You can sit next to me on the aeroplane to the US next week, and we'll have 15 hours of it.
Oh, I love it.
I feel sorry for you. But
Sorry, keep going.
But reality is, the moment you make rules, you've got to have people to administer the rules. And remember, everybody administering rules is essentially in an unproductive role, supervising the rules they're administering, right? Which is important. But when the balance is too much in favour of it's like having 15 supervisors and one worker, right? It doesn't work, right?
It doesn't happen at Burwood Council, I can guarantee you.
I like that mayor very much.
They all work there, don't they?
I actually like that mayor very much. He's a superstar.
He's a superstar.
He's a superstar.
When God made him, he broke the mould, you know that.
That's right.
Yeah.
But let me say this. At the end, a lot less rules would achieve the same effect. I won't name exact incidents, but when I got called by a planning minister once who said, what about these rules? How do I fix them? I said, Minister, the best way to fix them is you can shred them because they're already found in 14 other instruments. You don't need to keep repeating and adding to the rules because it means I need another 2 chapters in the submission. So if they give us less rules, you know what I said to Barry O'Farrell once before he became Premier? He said, we need you to deliver more things for us in the private sector. I said, he wasn't then Premier, he was still Mr. O'Farrell. I said, Mr. O'Farrell, let me explain it this way. You draw the yellow lines, you set the speed limit, we just drive the cars. You make it school zone everywhere with narrow lanes, we go slow. You widen the lanes and give me 110, I'll go fast. The problem is, it's school zone everywhere.
Tom, please put your hands together. Thank you very much. And Tom, now I know you meet with politicians every day like I do, but I want to know if you had the opportunity in the next hour you're going to go meet the Premier, what would you say to him to help increase supply?
There's a lot that can be done within the existing legislation. The power of a planning minister to make a state environmental planning policy, a SEP, basically means that for any category of development, be that residential greenfield or brownfield, be that mixed use, be that of a certain financial worth, be that a data centre, it doesn't matter what. A SEP can be adjusted to change who does the assessment. It can be Tom Forrest, it can be Paul Nicolaou, it can be taken from the council and given to the state public service. It can be given to an external body. It also has the power to say, for any of those categories, any value, who will determine it? Be it the IPC or the Minister for Planning themselves. They can do all of that right now. It's a question of will. Now, I have a view that there is now a political licence that's been, 3 or 4 years ago, you would not have had every media organisation, from the Guardian on the left through to the Australian on the right, from ABC National in the morning on the radio, all the way through to 2GB, and everything in between, all agreeing that there's a housing supply crisis. I've been doing my best to be talking about the fact that 4 years ago it was coming. Now it's here. Now you're quite rightly asking the question, Paul, what do we do about it? The instruments are available to premiers and ministers to be able to fix the problem. They just need to have the will to do it. There's always another excuse. The excuse at the moment is we've got to get past the council elections, because otherwise if we go too hard, we'll lose the goodwill of the people. They call it, we'll lose the social licence. Goodness me. Next, we've got the council elections coming up. Soon after there'll be a federal election. Soon after that we'll be leading into another state election. We can't keep putting off dealing with what is actually a crisis. They've got the tools available to them. They can use the SEP to increase height, to restore profitability to the sector so that it draws investment back into the sector, so that we do get those development applications into the system, and hopefully we can at the same time create a pathway for faster assessments, and we can get out there and start delivering. Maybe even one day interest rates will start coming down and things will start looking better.
Professor, many people, especially those on the left, have said that negative gearing is something that's a big issue, whereas, I remember, I think it was Paul Keating that brought in negative gearing, and it's been a huge plus and a positive for providing housing for those who can't afford it. And there are those now that are pushing to remove negative gearing. What's your thoughts around negative gearing?
Well, it's a stimulus. It's a stimulus to the supply side, but it's because it works through giving people more capacity to purchase. Look, I think one of the problems we've got is actually I don't think it's negative gearing is the problem. It's probably the capital gains tax side of it, which is more of an incentive in this context. I think picking off those one or two little things on the not on the margins, but and saying this is the solution. It's not the way forward. There is more than. We do need some reforms on tax. I think land tax is probably the most important one that we could do away with. That's something which I think needs to be seriously looked at by federal and state governments and brought in together. We probably all agree with that. That's one thing. But I think I just want to make one point. There's two questions here. One is about housing affordability. And the general thought is if you have more supply, then it will help with affordability. Yes, it may put a brake on prices going up. The other thing is affordable housing. Now, there's always a group in the marketplace, if you like, who can't afford what the market can deliver. They may be 10%, something like that, 15%. If government was to step forward and deal with that part of the problem, it would take that away from you, take away from the development industry having to pay to produce affordable housing, which is what is being asked. So I think government needs to decide that it will put money, serious money, into building those homes for people who can't afford the market. We used to do it 50, 60 years ago after the Second World War. It was a revolution in housing, and it would take the strain off the developer who are constantly being banged on the shoulder saying, you've got to pay for affordable housing through development levies. And I think that would help deal with some of the problems you deal with. More supply, yes, it will help reduce house prices. I don't think it'll bring it down, to be honest. I think we need to be frank about that. So, and I don't think that negative gearing on its own does much to change the balance.
Shane, there's been a massive debate going on between the federal Labor government and also the federal opposition in relation to immigration. And I think it's going to Parliament this week where they want to reduce the number of overseas students coming into the country because everyone wants to blame immigration, blame the overseas students for taking up and increasing and creating the housing crisis. And there'll be others who would say we need to bring in more students because they help fill the jobs the Australians don't want to do, on one hand, and immigration then creates and stimulates the economy. Your thoughts?
My thoughts on immigration have been published many times, but let me say this. This country did not benefit from immigration. It was built
That's right.
on immigration.
Good point.
That's the first thing. The second thing is there's a very important demographic problem that all of the Western countries have, and that is that the entire tax base, that is the $700 billion generated by the federal government and the $100 billion generated in tax for the state governments, is essentially produced by the 20 to 60 age group demographic. Essentially the people in this room, which are 48% of the Australian population, they pay 100% of the tax. Now the problem demographically is, because we're having less children and we're having them later, this demographic is shrinking by 0.2% a year. If you allow this trend unarrested, you will get to about 40% paying all of the tax, and by then it is an unfixable problem. So, migration is a simple way to fix it. There's 3 ways you can fix that demographic, right? You can have more babies. By the way, that's something you can all do for Australia today. You can go home, please think about it.
Yeah.
Tell your wives and your husbands, this is not about them, it's about Australia.
Wow. Who's keen on having a baby tonight?
Please, tonight. Get on with it.
Is anyone
It's for our
interested?
country. It's for our country.
Shane, you've stimulated a bit of conversation around the room on that one, Shane. But Shane, you may recall Peter Costello once said, and he encouraged Australians to have one for the mother, one for the father, and one for the economy. Do you think that Albanese, now that he's getting married, he might consider doing that?
Well, he hasn't done well, and he's only had one. But let me say this: at the moment, every couple in Australia is having 1.6 children. So we're not even replacing mum and dad. You don't have to be Einstein to work out that if you reduce the number of hours worked in the productive part of the economy, that you will have a demographic and structural economic problem within 30 years. You don't have to be Einstein. So there's 3 ways to fix it. You can reduce wages or increase working hours. Neither of 2 things are going to happen. You can have more children. Now, despite everything we're doing, we're having less and less every year, so that's not working. Or you can just import lots of people in the 14 to 40 age group. So 14-year-olds can come, sit at school, finish the HSC, go straight to uni. 4 years later, we've got them in the workforce for 40 years. That's a magnificent outcome. Now, by the way, on students, I teach at 2 universities. So let me tell you this. I couldn't think of a better migrant than a first-class student doing honours or master's or PhD who finishes their degree in Australia and stays here. They're smart, they're highly educated in an area we've educated them in, they understand the Australian way of life, and they add to the knowledge base and make lots of money and pay tax. I think we should triple that quota, if you ask me.
Thank you, Shane. Tom, are you going to go home tonight and speak to your partner about maybe a baby or 2?
Certainly not. Leave that up to Shane.
Well, you're still young enough to do so.
Yeah. Yes. A couple of years ago, we organised a function with Harry Triguboff and Alex Hawke, former Liberal Party Minister for Immigration. It was in the context of COVID. We said we desperately need to boost immigration numbers, and we hired a woman by the name of Sarah Mitchell. She's now the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank. At the time, she was working for BIS Oxford Economics. She basically outlined the benefit of migration to the society. Migration, generally, and people in this room would certainly appreciate this. People who come to Australia are very grateful to be here. We all are. They often work, they have a higher productivity rate. They've been educated overseas, so we haven't had to pay for their education. We don't have to pay for their childcare costs. They come here as ready-made, skilled, educated, but burgeoning employees or employers. So they add to the participation rate because often mum and dad both work, often 2 jobs because they want to make a better life for their families and their children. So they've got a higher productivity rate than the Australian workforce. From the day they arrive, they increase the participation rate and they generate more tax. Because they're at an age, and actually we don't let people in if they're really sick. So they're at an age where they're less likely to be a burden on the healthcare system. They're paying lots of tax because they're working 2 jobs flat out. It's a massive boost to the economy. So the real obligation we've got here is not, the problem is not with immigration. That's the solution. The problem is with the planning system not letting us build enough houses to be able to accommodate them. It is criminal to bring them all in and not to build the houses. So the solution is not closing out the door. The solution is build more houses.
Professor, your thoughts?
Yes, look, I'm all for immigration. You can tell by my accent. And I brought 2 children here, and I'm now literally 2 weeks ago I was with my grandfather. So I think I've done my bit, and I deserve a round of applause. I'm still doing my bit because unfortunately my 2 children, whilst being in their 30s, aren't paying enough tax because they don't earn enough money. Therefore, I'm bailing them out all the time. So this is a problem that we all have, I'm sure. But look, immigration is what Australia was built on. Once we get here and we can consolidate ourselves, we give up on the idea of reproducing. Life's too good, perhaps. But there are more serious reasons behind that. But immigration is what we're all about. And Tom's right. If we as a federal government needs immigration, it does, then it should also put its mind to where the immigrants are being housed and how they're being housed. And unfortunately, we have a federal government who effectively abrogates the responsibility for that to the States and says, right, it's your problem. You do housing, you have nothing to do with us. I think it's time the federal government came up, stepped up to the mark and says, yes, we want to grow our economy, we need immigration, and we're going to have a national plan where these folks are going to go and how we're going to house them. They don't have that, and that's a real problem.
Yeah. Nicholas, the President, has asked this question, if I may. How do emerging technologies influence the value and appeal of real estate as an asset class, e.g. smart buildings, AI-driven property management, etc.? Who would like to answer that question? Tom?
There's no doubt that the growth in the technology is massively improving the quality of the management of buildings once built. We're getting significant economies of scale out of the way we deal with electricity supply, the way we deal with renewables, the way we deal with telecommunications and water and recycling. All of those things are massively enhanced, and now we move towards off-site manufactured homes, off-site manufactured buildings in time. We've got regulatory red tape to overcome there. We've got cynicism and the ongoing legacy of the view that anything that's manufactured off-site is akin to a caravan park, where of course that's not the case. There are issues to be dealt with, but it is certainly a productivity opportunity for the construction and property sector, and it's one that I completely agree with Selim. It should be embraced.
Professor?
Yeah, we've two things. One is I think Tom's put his finger on one of the problems is we need to adopt new technologies because the way in which we build housing has to change. Environmentally, we have to do something different than the old sort of the approach we have at the moment. I won't put that on one side. We've got a new project funded by the state government looking at AI and planning, you'll be pleased to know, to see whether artificial intelligence, machine learning, all that sort of thing can improve the way in which we use data to do the planning process. And we're working with the private sector on that. It's just kicked off right now, and we'll be moving to a new place in the technology part to set that up. I think there's some real opportunity here to use. I mean, we live in a world of data. Every time you walk 2 steps, somebody is monitoring where you're going and knows what you're doing. It's pretty frightening. But that information could be used, and all sorts of other data could be used to help the planning process improve what it does. To know where people are, what they're doing, why they're doing it, and feed that through AI systems to make better planning outcomes. Now we're working on that, others are doing it too. I think there's a real opportunity here for that technology to improve the planning system, and if that makes for better planning, then I'm sure Tom and Shane will agree with me there.
I mean, goodness, all of us here who have dealt with the New South Wales planning portal can't wait for more technology to be introduced. Good luck with that, Bill.
Beautiful. All right, we're running out of time, and I'm conscious. Can we at least take 2 questions from the floor? Are there anyone in the room who's got a burning question you'd like to ask the panel? There's 2 questions. I might get one at the back because he put up his hand first, and then there was a second question there. We might take a question over here if there is one. I think we're not enough time. Can you say who you are and where you're from? Michael, right at the back of the room. If you put up your hand, the gentleman that put up the hand. First. Yep, that's it. You found him, Michael?
Yeah.
It looks like the Greek version, or the Greek or Lebanese version of George Clooney, I think. I got him right?
Yeah, thanks. Look, the question's for Professor Shane. You mentioned we need more university students with master's degrees, but I think we're missing the big picture with the skill shortage. A little bit more emphasis on TAFE students and carpenters and more skilled workers to come and be a bit more active on site, because the current apprentices and young crew coming through are I suppose, don't have enough skills to be on site, and that's what we need for the future. That's what I feel we need more emphasis on, TAFEs and practical learning.
I agree. We actually need more of everything, right? We need to study for maths, for geography, for history, for science. We're failing all the subjects. So I have no doubt that we are also missing some serious skill shortages. And I think rather than take all these billions of dollars away from TAFE courses, they should all be refunded in the interest of the nation. I mean, in a $700 billion budget, if you can't find $3 billion to fund really top-notch TAFE courses for the trades to come and supply the industries that are vital, you can't be running this country well.
Tom, yesterday the Minister for Training, Skills and Training, Steve Wan, announced or launched the review of TAFE and training. And the gentleman's question is a very valid one. We don't have enough plumbers, we don't have enough electricians, we don't have enough carpenters. We don't even. I visited a number of the metro stations before they opened, and competing for engineers is a big issue. And Shane just articulated that STEM is a big issue where science, technology, engineering, maths, we're not getting enough of those people in there. What would you, if you were meeting with the Premier this afternoon, what would you be saying to him about the shortage of skills, trades people?
I certainly agree. I certainly agree with the question and the spirit of the question. We have a problem in the construction workforce, and all in this room that work in the industry will know this all too well. During COVID, there was a bit of a mass exodus. Some of them were because they were on 457 visas and they weren't getting JobKeeper money, so they had to go home. Problem is the rest of the world opened earlier than us, so there was lots of jobs available in Canada and elsewhere, and the people who were working in Australia, they went and worked elsewhere where there was an opportunity. So they didn't come back here. Some of them did, a lot of them didn't. The students all came back, but not the actual skilled workers who were working on sites. We've also got an ageing demographic of construction workers. So the great resignation was a very real thing in our industry. The number of people who worked outdoors in difficult conditions as concrete tensioners, or concrete pourers, or bricklayers, or labourers, or scaffolders, or window glass installers, etc., etc. All of those areas, there are critical skill shortages, let alone all the internal and finishing trades, which we're suffering from shortages right across the entire market. So absolutely we need to be training more, but also we need to be opening the door to immigration to bring those critical, less skilled workers back into our economy to get us going.
Great. There's one more question here, and who's that? Here we go.
Sarkis Nassim from Hold My Property. Look, my experience in business for over 25 years, collaboration approach the way forward. Cooperation and collaboration approach between government, institute and private sector, we can achieve our objective. And let's be fair with each other at the moment. It's very noticeable in our industry at the senior people in our state level. The strategy and the vision in place, but how we can execute it, it's a gap there. Let's work how we can execute it. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks, Sarkis. Comments, Shane?
You go. I think we have lost the art of collaboration between the public and the private sector. There's always a feeling out there in the public service at the moment that anyone that makes money is somehow committing a crime. There's the idea that we're going to give them a little bit of uplift here to try and encourage housing supply, but at the same time we're going to hit them with an affordable housing tax. One step forward, two steps backwards, and they wonder why they've got a problem. I think the idea of having a better collaborative arrangement where you can sit down and you can show a FISO and you can say, look, we can't build this because we're actually going to lose money. He said, what's more, the banks won't give us the money in the first place because we can't demonstrate a sufficient profit to cover the risk that we're facing. There's no interest in that conversation in the public service, and that's why we continue to have a crisis. I completely agree, as I almost always do with Sarkis Nassim, when he says we need to bring back a spirit of collaboration and cooperation so that we can work together to resolve what is a really big crisis and getting worse, not better right now.
Shane, comment? Maybe a quote from someone that talks about collaboration?
Well, let's say this, all tax is arbitrary. So when they tell you I need more income tax was first introduced by Charles II in 1661.
I think.
Now, do you know why it made sense?
No, tell me why.
because it didn't make sense. The king said that's a really good thing to tax. So when they tell you we need an affordable housing levy or more tax on this or more tax, that's all entirely made up arbitrary stuff that they need basically money to run the country with. So all taxes are arbitrary. So please don't sell me the benefit, just tell me I need it and I'm happy to pay it, as long as the productivity item that's commensurate with that at my end allows me to generate more tax for you for next time. But if you stifle me with taxation so I can't make money, guess what? Your tax revenues for next year don't work either.
Professor, have you got a quote or you're going to make a statement?
I don't have any quotes, no, but I can tell you that I supervised Shane's PhD, and this is the sort of thing you get every supervision session. Some famous quote from somebody. Most of it, I kind of knew who they were, but there were some really ancients in there. I don't know what he did. I don't know what he was doing when he was doing his PhD, but he wasn't actually doing his PhD at the time. He was reading something else. But anyway, he does this a lot, and he has a fantastic mind. He's extremely good at details. He'll reel off details that you will never believe anybody could ever remember, and you've heard some of them today. Anyway, I digress, as they say. The other thing I should say is I think we should have some fact-checking up here, because I'm not entirely sure that James I was the first person to bring in income tax. But that's by the by.
Hang on, you reviewed his PhD.
No, I didn't actually have it. No, I supervised it, which is a different thing.
Sorry, I apologise.
I won't tell you how we got it through, but anyway, that's the thing. Collaboration. There are organisations who can do this, have done this in the past. I mean, when I first came here, it was 25 years ago, Lancom was a big beast out there doing stuff, collaborating. Now, I don't know, Tom will have a view on this because he was certainly around and involved in the thing, and certainly Shane will. But if we need a collaboration between government and industry, then some agency like that is probably a way forward to get that collaboration going. Whether it's a revamped Lancom, it seems to be a bit dead at the moment, I don't know, but to actually reinstate a vehicle, a medium by which the industry and government can work together, perhaps at that arm's length. That's the point. Lancom is an arm's length agency and used to get on with things. I don't know. Tom, what do you think?
I'm going to say no.
I'm going to propose an alternative, and that is to simply don't be scared of allowing the private sector to innovate, to come up to and reward them for the risk that they take by investing in the property supply sector. Reward them for the effort that they put in, for the risk that they take with all the complications and difficulties we face. Give us a profit incentive, and then we'll solve your housing supply crisis. We'll come up with all sorts of different ways, be that through technology, through that changes to the immigration scheme to bring in more workers, training up more people through TAFE colleges and supported by work-based skills development programs. We'll find ways to solve the shortages and the difficulties if you make it profitable for us. But by not making it profitable, you've got Buckley's. And I think that that's the most important thing. Now, if government can help by providing for infrastructure, by easing those fees, taxes and charges, but perhaps the Commonwealth funding local councils that overachieve on their housing supply target numbers, by giving them additional money for public open space, for kindergartens, for childcare facilities, for community facilities. The federal government could easily stimulate housing supply if they bothered to look beyond the internal confines. They say it's a crisis and then they go, job's done. Job's not done. They've got to help.
Thanks, Tom. Final word, Shane?
I would say we're at such a state of frustration with timing, we're ready to try anything.
Yep. Is that a quote from you?
Yeah.
Right, so in 10 years or 15 years' time, we can quote you, Shane? Beautiful. Look, and as the final remark, as I've got the right of reply or the right to finalise, I think we're very lucky, right? I mean, at the end of the day, Premier Minns and Minister Scully, and they're all trying their best, right? And at the end of the day, it may not be 100% perfect, but at least the government is listening, and is listening to people like Shane and Tom and the Professor, myself and others, Committee of City and so on. And I think it's important that we are united and give this government the opportunity to at least try. And that's what they're doing, and they've made some decisions around the transport-orientated developments. That they are with Kirsten Fishburn, the Secretary for Planning, is also doing her bit. I know it's not 100% perfect, right? But at the end of the day, we're lucky to be living in this city, in this country, where at least we've got the democracy, the system in places that we can at least bring about change. So credit to Premier Minns, because he's taken it on, and it's been an issue that this government has been working on the last 12 months, 18 months, and at least we need to work with them, because it's not 100% perfect, as I said. Friends, please put your hands together and thank Shane, Tom, the Professor, for a wonderful Q&A. And I think, Michael, we have a small gift.